Good afternoon, and welcome to today's ADWEEK webinar, where we'll be discussing the question of, are your ads ready for AI and automation? Today's webinar is sponsored by Celtra. I'm Danielle Moore, Senior Manager here with ADWEEK's Content Studio, and I will be your host today. Today's presentation should go somewhere in the 35-minute range, after which we're definitely going to have time for audience Q&A, and we'll get to as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. All right, now let me introduce you to today's speaker. We're happy to be joined by Tanya Mosquera, Senior Director of Marketing at Celtra. With a decade of experience in digital advertising, Tanya has extensive hands-on design and marketing knowledge, while also leading creative and production teams. She's collaborated with major global brands and has navigated countless creative and technical challenges, motivating her to share her learnings and support similar teams. All right, we've got a lot of great content to dive into today, so without further ado, let me bring Tanya up on screen here to get us started. Welcome, Tanya. Thank you so much for joining us today. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you for this warm introduction, Danielle. And thanks for everyone joining us for this webinar today. So Danielle already gave a really nice introduction. My name is Tanya, and as she already mentioned, I actually have a lot of design background, which means I've worked on a lot of advertising campaigns hands-on in the past. I've also led a lot of creative teams and got a lot of great learnings from that I'm hoping I can share with you today as well. Just a couple of words about our company as well, in case you're not familiar with us. At Celtra, we really believe that successful advertising starts with impactful creatives. So what we do is we build cloud-based software solutions that empower advertisers to enhance the efficiency, creative quality, and the impact of their digital advertising performance. Essentially, we help businesses transform traditional creative workflows into much more efficient and flexible work streams with the help of AI and automation. So let's go ahead and dive in. Obviously, a very tech-heavy content topic today. So I'd like to start by laying some groundwork. I want to start by reflecting on the many ways that technology keeps disrupting and changing our advertising landscape. It's true that technology advancements have always been closely linked to the evolution of advertising. And if we think of a timeline, and I've put a little illustration here on the screen, you can see all the different mediums of advertising developing through time. You know, if we think all the way back to hand-drawn illustrations, how they were replaced by print, and then radio became a big, exciting new medium. There was obviously a big era of TV advertising, and then the whole internet, mobile devices, causing additional disruption with programmatic. There was video being a big thing. So in the recent years, again, we're seeing a big push with all these new emerging technologies. A lot of stuff being powered by AI that's opening up completely new avenues. So overall, technology has brought on a ton of new creative opportunities. It's also created a lot of new touch points to communicate with consumers in new, engaging ways. But all that being really positive, we also have to admit that this fragmentation has just made marketing as a discipline a lot more challenging. And if we think of all the creative, production, and media teams today, they are faced with completely new levels of complexity. And on the bottom of the screen, you can actually see just a part of the marketing technology landscape. And this by itself is quite a proof of how fragmented this ecosystem is and how much complexity we're experiencing in this era. And as we're facing this growing complexity and these increasing demands within digital advertising, there's obviously a lot of things that marketers have on their minds. There's only the number of channels and formats that keeps constantly growing. There's always new activations, new campaign launches coming up. Usually there's a push for testing. Let's try different variations, maybe different messaging, compare to see what performs better. Maybe we want to test different layouts, different visuals. There's also this whole aspect of personalization, relevancy. So all that, if you start multiplying that, it just keeps adding up to this insane amount of deliverables, this insane amount of things to keep in mind and pay attention to. So like I said, a lot of creative and production teams today are struggling just to keep up and just to deliver what's expected of them. But if we zoom out from all these little things and little nuances that you have to pay attention to, when we take a look at the bigger picture and the things that marketers are essentially keeping front of mind, there's three things that marketers are juggling today. Essentially, those three are quality, the speed, and the price of their digital advertising. So three main things, just to simplify things. But as the joke usually goes, you can only pick two of these, and it will be really hard for you to achieve all three. So most advertisers at some point or another are forced to make compromises. If you want to have high quality and affordable ads, the process will usually be slow. If you want it affordable and fast, you're risking ending up with low quality. And then the ones that are both high quality and fast usually do not come cheap. And this is exactly an area where AI and automation really deliver on the promise. Because with the help of technology, marketers are now able to check all of these boxes. They are able to move much faster, they're able to get their advertising at a reasonable price, and also keep it high quality and on brand, which is really important. So essentially what they want to do is they want to start leveraging these new automation and AI solutions in order to deliver faster, smarter, and better advertising. And I will take you through a simple diagram to make this a little bit more tangible. So you can imagine where exactly these types of solutions come into the process and how they could help your teams or your companies, or where you would start thinking about these things. So if we start with traditional linear workflows, let's start with this kind of a typical example, a little bit simplified, but you can see it's more or less a production line. You go from your marketing objectives, your strategy, do some creative concepting, want to produce your assets, your content, in the end, deliver it to media. So even though this looks like a very simple process, it means it goes from one team to another. And what we're seeing happen is there's a lot of bottlenecks. There's a lot of slow turnaround times, because if you want to go back or make an adjustment, sometimes it means you have to go 2 steps back and then do it all over again. Or sometimes that means that a lot of advertisers are limiting their production scope because it just takes too long, or it's too complex of a thing to go back or adjust or create additional things. Or they lower their bar and lower the quality and might end up with poor customers' experiences. So instead of these linear workflows, essentially what the goal would be to create a closed feedback loop where you would have your media strategy and your creative execution aligned. We want to bring all these different teams and personas together into a seamless connected process that goes through all of your phases. So you would want to have everything from media plan, production and review, any adaptations, distribution, all the way to measurements, and then optimization, and then do another adaptation. You see how you can kind of continue to go all the way around as many times as you want. And in that process, you would obviously have AI overlaid, automation overlaid. So you would be getting insights, recommendations based on customer behavior, based on activity, maybe past performance. So you would be constantly improving your advertising results. And as everybody would be on the same page, they would also be working a lot faster and a lot smarter. And I bet each campaign can learn a little bit from the previous one. So I try to keep this diagram as simple as I could, but I can also summarize it in the 3 core principles you're trying to achieve as you are reworking your flow. So those 3 principles, and I'll dive into each one of these a little bit further so we can explore them. But just as an overview, what you're aiming to achieve with these types of changes and implementation of technology in order to get to that better, faster, and smarter way of working would be to first automate your production. You would want to align your teams for success, and you would want to elevate your performance. Now, let's see what each of those actually means. So the first one is obviously pretty straightforward. You would want to start automating the production of your creative assets in case you're not doing it yet. There's different ways and different levels of doing it. It doesn't have to be full automation. Maybe you're already using some sort of plugins or scripts that help you facilitate that. But there's no denying that manual and artisanal production just doesn't hold up anymore. Not when you're trying to cover all those channels, variations that we mentioned. There's just no way that you're able to keep up in that old school way of working. Because if you're continuing to do that, there's definitely going to be a creative bottleneck, because artisanal creative processes just cannot keep up with the fast pace of advertising today. What you would want is really an automated solution that's flexible enough and allows you to cover all your needs, whether that's multiple sizes, multiple channels, languages, audiences, whatever it may be that you're trying to cover. You want to have a platform, a tool, a solution that enables you to move faster. And usually that ends up being kind of a modular approach. So you can easily swap certain elements of your creative, whether that be copy tweaks, it could be visual changes, it could be different layouts. Obviously, sizes and channels are kind of a given, but even within the creative, you're able to play around with that modular approach, kind of like building blocks, create exactly what is it that you need and end up with any variation that you might need. One thing to be careful of is when you're implementing any new technology, you definitely want to make sure you're being careful in how far you go. And you want to ensure that you're preserving your brand identity and you're keeping quality control. You can see a little example here on the screen, because we all know that AI and technology is not bulletproof. So you definitely have to think about how far is it that you're wanting to regain that creative control. Okay, so if we move on to the second point that I mentioned, it's about the importance of aligning all of your teams for success. So I gave you an example of rowing here in this case. And as you can see, it is really important to have everyone in sync and moving in the same direction so something like this does not happen. If we think about the processes and teams involved in this digital advertising, there's a lot of phases like, briefing, ideation. We saw all that, production, review, approval. Then you go distribution, analysis, optimization. You can see how many I'm listing. It's usually quite a complex process. So you definitely have multiple teams involved. You have multiple workflows packed in there, different tools they're using. So the first step would be to just simplify this as much as you can and try to bring these teams together to the same source of truth, to the same page. Because right now, you saw everybody's kind of doing their own thing, and it's not exactly the movement we're going after. It would probably be more something like this. This would be something that you would want. Everyone kind of in sync, moving in the same direction, with clear progress, with great alignment. And in order to do that, you got to close some gaps. So one of the biggest gaps that we're noticing or hearing about is the gap between media and creative. Those two are usually separate teams, separate processes. And you would think, that media strategy, buying and optimizing should be really closely connected to then the creative execution, the production of creative and optimization of creative. But as I said, a lot of times it's still two quite disconnected teams and disconnected processes. And the first thing they need to get closer would be visibility of each other's activities, and then involvement from media plan, creative brief. And then even after launch, when they're doing their post-launch analysis, when they're doing optimization, those two should be working together. So as they're doing their media optimizations, creative optimization also comes in. If there's any adjustments, in order to ensure the best possible performance, those need to be aligned on both sides. And if you're not into sports and rowing, let me actually show you another image that might resonate better. because you can also imagine marketing as this well-synchronized orchestra where each member plays their part, but really all comes together as a group. So I mentioned media and creative, but there's also a different aspect of getting teams together. If you're a large organization, you want to keep your global teams and your local teams connected because you're trying to achieve consistent quality and faster campaign launches across your markets. So you're kind of looking for a balance where you want to empower your local teams so they have everything they need to launch, but at the same time, you want to keep some level of control and consistency and quality across the board. So in terms of digital advertising, that manifests in global toolkits being prepared. So you have this collection of creative that can be easily adapted for different markets, for different strategies, goals. And you can obviously use AI for any quick translations, additional copy suggestions, and that all speeds up the whole process. It ensures quality, but still leaves the local market some level of flexibility. So if they want to have some, local market nuances, you could definitely go and modify any messaging, any visuals, in order to really ensure they're going to resonate with their audience. And now we get to the third one, the last one, and I would say probably the ultimate goal you're after. Because at the end of the day, what you want to achieve is you want to elevate your creative performance. You're making all these plans, all these different strategies, because at the end of the day, you want your people to see your thing or engage with your brand or buy your products. And although there's unfortunately not a universal blueprint out there, because it's just such a fast-moving environment. There's so many different nuances to different industries. We can't really give you a blueprint to success. But I can tell you that in order to achieve better results, you got to make an effort. You got to start to test, iterate, got to try a lot of different concepts, and you got to be able to do that fast so you can figure out what works and optimize and keep improving and building on that. So you don't want it to just stay in theory and your assumptions. You want your rocket to launch so that you really need access to that instant creative supply that automation can provide. So you can do all these things and you can move faster. And once you have a quick way to make all these different creatives, all these different variations that you need, there's really no limit to what you can do. Any personalization strategy you can think of, obviously localization. You're definitely able to avoid ad fatigue by regularly refreshing your creatives. And as I mentioned, you want to work off of your past learnings and you want to use any previous performance data to improve your future campaigns. So let's take a look at some results that we're seeing from these approaches. Stuff that brands that are already using creative automation were able to achieve by implementing these changes. So by automating their production, distribution, and other processes, we're seeing 10 times more efficient production. We're seeing 5 times faster time to market as a consequence of aligning their teams. And we're seeing double performance as a result of more testing and optimization of creative. And these are really great numbers, but I do want to be clear and emphasize that this does not happen by simply pressing a magic button. So we sometimes think of technology as this magic button that's going to solve all of our problems, and it's really not a quick fix. In reality, it's usually a combination. It's most likely not just a technology problem. A big part of the challenge are usually the outdated processes and workflows, because people just continue to work the same ways they've always worked. Maybe they will use technology to find a smarter way, get a little bit faster to do a couple of their tasks. But overall, most people are just not motivated to drastically change the way they work. So usually there has to be somebody in charge driving these changes, usually top down, in order to see more dramatic results, in order to align those teams like we saw in that rowing example, or for everybody to play together in a symphony like the orchestra. So it really starts by taking a look at your organization, identifying the challenges you're currently facing, and also figuring out if it's a technology problem or a process problem. And to be honest, usually it's a mix of both. So luckily, there's also technology out there that can address both of these. So you're able to simplify processes as well as speed up your tasks with help of automation. So let's talk a little bit about implementation. I did mention a little bit of resistance already. So change is usually hard because people usually don't like change. You're used to working in the same way for years, or maybe had your own setup really figured out. And then somebody comes up with this new way of doing things, or start to introduce new technology, new platforms. It's completely understandable. It takes some time for people to get used to new ways of working. We actually hear this a lot from our clients. In the beginning, a lot of them are skeptical. They're weighing the pros and cons, which is completely normal. People want to evaluate if this type of change actually makes sense. But the interesting thing is that, change is hard, except when it's better. Then change is easy. If something will make your life easier, you will embrace it much faster. And I can give you a couple of examples of this. You will probably recognize this, and I don't have to spend a lot of time explaining it. But obviously, the switch from Blockbuster to Netflix was very fast, very easy. And we all know how that ended up for both of these companies. Another one, I'm not sure when the last time is that any of us have picked up a printed map. The switch to online maps, to navigation, was definitely a no-brainer. And the same thing is happening in manual production, being replaced by new technology. There's currently a lot of, or in the past, let's say, a lot of design tools, production tools. You have to switch, video editing software. And then all these AI plugins or separate solutions started emerging, but you're still dealing with translations. You got media plans in your spreadsheets. You got a lot of emails and messaging, getting something approved, circling back, checking on the status. So really, really complex processes that can easily be replaced by specialized solutions for digital advertising that address specific challenges and workflows of the industry. Because in the end, simplicity always wins. And if you can make something easier, faster, and better, you're going to see that adoption, and you're also going to see results come in pretty quickly. Okay, I've actually covered most of the content, so my last section is to take a look at what success looks like. So I've already mentioned we work with a lot of great brands, a lot of big global brands that can implement this across the board, and we're also seeing some great results. So I want to take you through a couple of case studies and explain how exactly they were able to achieve these great results. So first one we're going to take a look at is Lyft. So I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but it's a ride-sharing company that in this case was facing some challenges, trying to produce more personalized video-based creatives. And as I'm sure you're all aware, video is kind of one of the most complex things. It really takes a lot of your budget, time. They're really time consuming. So usually you just want to wrap that up and deliver it. But here they were really trying to personalize it even further. So they were trying to incorporate specifically more lifestyle scenes in their videos and make those videos tailored for certain channels, maybe different markets. So they really wanted to get that video variety out there. And with the help of Celtra's creative automation software, they were able to implement a modular video production workflow. So they set up their videos in modular ways, and that enabled their growth team to handle any messaging or offering nuances on the fly. So they didn't have to go back to the design team, back to the video team to produce 10 or 20 new videos. They were actually able to type it in or swap the asset, whatever the change was, on the fly. They got the instant creative back, and it didn't impact the original creative design. So they kept their on-brand videos and they were able to achieve a 45% decrease in cost per acquisition with that. They were able to produce all of that 10 times more efficiently. And the total was more than 600 unique video-based creatives. So really, really nice success story from Lyft and video specifically, which is usually a huge challenge to automate or personalize. Okay, next one we have up, I think I don't have to introduce too much because I'm sure you all know Nike. And we can also probably all agree they are one of the most consistent with their advertising and branding overall. So what they were trying to do is still preserve that brand consistency and quality, but at the same time, they were trying to streamline the localization of their member state campaign. So obviously big brands like Nike, a lot of local markets, and if they start localizing, that really starts scaling up pretty quickly. So they were trying to automate that process while preserving brand quality and consistency, and using Sultra's software and Sultra's creative services in this case, Nike actually developed a global toolkit. So a nice collection of creatives with different channels and formats that empowered local teams to easily adapt any market-specific content. So market teams could simply, like I said, change the messaging, add any translations, change any maybe local talent, stuff like that, special offers specific to market. And this ended adding up to more than 17,000 creatives in a single round. And they were able to achieve a really impressive, almost 20x efficiency while doing this. So I really can't stress enough how proud we are to be part of a success stories like these. And we're definitely sure that we can help many more of you that are struggling with similar challenges. So if you want to learn more about Sultra's creative automation, please reach out. Could demo with our team. We'll be happy to explain and maybe take a look at what are some of the challenges you're dealing with and how we can be of help. So this was actually all from my side, and we came to questions. So we're going to bring Danielle back and see what you guys are interested in.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that presentation, Tanya. So much to unpack there. Lots to discuss. Thanks so much for those insights. As you mentioned, we do have time to take some questions. We're going to get to as many as we can over the next 5 to 10 minutes or so. To our audience members, please know that if we don't get to your question today, we always make sure they get forwarded over to our speaker so they have the opportunity to reply offline. All right, let's dive into some of these questions. So the first question I have for you today is number 3. How can teams best prepare to maximize the value of creative automation in your view?
Okay, so I did mention some of this in the presentation already. I think the first step would be identifying the challenges you're currently facing in your digital advertising process. I think the best things to take a look at would be what are your content demands? You know, how much are you producing? Do you have any production bottlenecks that I mentioned? Also evaluating how flexible do you want to stay? You know, how agile do your markets need to be? That sort of thing. And then also just realistically evaluating where do you see inefficiencies in your current process and collaboration? So those teams that need to come together, really defining where you see those areas of improvement. And then the second thing would be setting your priorities. So once you do decide you want to get into, implementation of such technology, you want to have, like I said, your priorities top of mind. If brand consistency and creative control, how important are those to you? Are you okay with the black box AI solution, or do you want to regain all the control on your part? Also, how fast do you want to move? How many campaigns are you producing in a year? That sort of thing. And if you are currently optimizing any performance, how are you doing that? How do you want to improve that? Do you want to do more testing, more optimization, that sort of thing? And then just lastly, once you are, on board, want to start implementing, definitely you got to set a champion that's going to drive that adoption. So you want to overcome any resistance to change and make sure it's a successful implementation.
Absolutely. Yeah, the leadership element, I think, is so crucial here. I appreciate that answer so much, and I want to jump to another question that relates to it. Number 7, you mentioned that the second step in that process is finding those efficiencies, right? So someone's asking, how is efficiency calculated? And I guess by extension, like how is inefficiency calculated? How would you go about thinking about that, either pre this process or during and post implementing it?
Yes. So all the data that you saw today is actually pre-Celtra versus post-Celtra implementation. So how much efficiency gain did these teams achieve? Usually it's a combination of effort, kind of time. There's a formula behind it that I don't currently have with me, but trust me, it's been carefully calculated and monitored. So it is a comparison of a manual process, so to speak, or whatever process you had before implementing Celtra's creative automation, and then how efficient you were afterwards. So it's a direct comparison of the time and effort that was invested into all the process, production, distribution included. So efficiency in delivering a campaign, essentially.
Thanks for walking us through that. So our next question here, I'm going to jump to number 9. Someone's asking, can you go a bit more into detail about how AI and automation can help connect creative and media teams specifically? So looking for some additional detail there.
Yeah. So maybe just, to clarify a little bit further, I wouldn't generalize to say all solutions help bring these teams together. And that's why I think it's important you have a clear picture of what it is that you're trying to solve. If that is one of your challenges and you're trying to bring these teams closer together, they need a unified source of truth. That would kind of be my starting point. They need the same type of solution where they both go and they can, like I said, monitor the campaign progression all the way from media plan to final distribution. So you want them to stay on the same page. And I think both of those teams actually use currently some of the AI or automation capabilities across different tools. But if you want to bring them together, you want to bring them to kind of the same page, same platform, same source of truth, where both teams can really get benefits and they want to work together because they're seeing benefits from work collaborating and seeing each other's work in progress.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for that. That makes sense. So we have a question here about the lift example that you shared, wondering if they can go into more detail. Question number 12 asks, could you please take us through how the lift video was built in order to automate localization? Any more insights there? They'd love that.
Of course. Here, I'm happy to have my creative background. So I've done some of those videos in the past myself, and I can go in great detail if needed. But essentially, it all comes down to those modular building blocks that I talked about. So once you're trying to automate your production, you have to start thinking about all of your brand assets as building blocks. So you got to separate the items that you would want to either localize or adapt in any way. You got to kind of break them apart. So we're no longer talking about a finalized video with all the text baked in, kind of finished product. We're actually talking about a base video that has text overlaid. It has logos. It maybe has some graphics, offers, that sort of thing. So you got to start looking at it in layers or as in building blocks that come together. And each one of those is editable or it can be automated in a certain way, meaning that if we have localization is a really easy one to explain because usually the text is being translated, or maybe there's a local offer that's unique to a certain location. So what you would do in that sense, a lot of the times the video would stay the same, or maybe there would be audio that would be translated, and then the text or any offers in text would be kind of automated in that sense. It could mean you drop in a spreadsheet that has 30 different locations with 30 different offers, and then you would get 30 different videos with that implemented, that sort of thing, just to simplify it a little bit further so it's easier to understand.
Yeah, it's cool to pull back the curtain on that process. And great to have your creative hands-on expertise as well in talking about this transition. So very cool to hear more about that. So you talked a little bit about how essential it is for there to really be someone organizationally or perhaps a group to leading the charge here. So in terms of how things are implemented, we have a question kind of related to that. I want to dig into a little bit. Number 6, asking, is this kind of automation better achieved with in-house agencies or for the regular agency of record or an outsourced situation. What's your take there?
We actually work with both situations. So obviously, different companies or brands are organized in different ways, and we see benefits, very similar benefits, actually coming from both sides. So I think either way, they're going to be able to see the same type of ease of use or benefits when they start automating this. It just depends how. I think here's where the local markets also come in, how much you're pushing that change on them. So if your agency prepares this nice global toolkit, then your local marketers also have to leverage it. So that's the only difference I would say. When it's an internal team, it's usually a little bit easier to disseminate that knowledge or kind of make that shift so everybody is using the same type of solution versus when it's an external agency building. You just got to make sure that then everybody can enjoy the rewards that come out of that automation. That's it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for walking us through that. All right, we have time for one more question here. I'm seeing one that's super interesting to me, kind of related to this speed and agility component that we're all going for. I loved the Venn diagrams you showed earlier about quality, speed, and expense. They're so relatable, I think, to so many of us. So this one's diving into the speed element, number 13 here. When gathering creative insights during a campaign, what best practices would you recommend for swiftly implementing these changes? The challenge for us often lies in coordinating with the creative design team to ensure they can act on those suggestions without delay. Any thoughts there?
Yes, this is actually a great question because this is an area that we are very quickly developing on. So we see great potential in these creative recommendations, so to speak. So historically, if we think about, past performance data, it's been around. People have gone back, checked the performance of past campaigns, but it usually didn't, that sort of data doesn't get back to creative teams, or at least not without a delay, as the question clearly said. So what we are trying to do now is, with the help of AI, bring past performance data straight into the creation tool. So when designers are actually putting together a new campaign, they can also check back to see, how did this type of image perform? How did these assets perform in the past? And they can get all of that straight into the tool where they are working, meaning they can quickly make any creative decisions. If the direction hasn't been set up front, they can make those creative recommendations. And we feel like that's a huge game changer because, like I said, data's been around, it just hasn't been in the right place necessarily. So we're trying to bring it back so it's going to be as useful as possible. It's going to help people to move even faster and achieve even better results, hopefully.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sounds like the key is having the data in the right place. So great things to think about there. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for questions today. But as I mentioned before, any questions we didn't get to, we'll make sure they get forwarded over to Tanya so she can potentially address offline. I'd like to thank our speaker as well as our sponsor, Celtra. Again, huge thanks to Tanya for joining us today and for letting us pick your brain during this Q&A session. Thank you to our audience for joining us live. And as always, we look forward to seeing everyone at an upcoming ADWEEK webinar. Thank you all so much.